welcome Photo One. So for our introduction to Photoshop today, we're going to do a tutorial together. You can either use this image that I've attached online of my dog Blitzen, or you can use your own picture from something that you've shot during class or something that you have available to you, even if you wanted to maybe use a picture that you found online. The advantage is if you use your own picture, then you might be able to turn this in for one of your projects. If you do not, just know that you can't turn in like a professional photograph or something you find online as your own work if it's not your work. So keep that in mind. But for the purpose of this tutorial, you can use whatever photograph you would like. So we're going to go over some of the Photoshop basics of the toolbar along with the different panels and take a look at how to blur the background of a photograph to represent that bokeh effect or simulate kind of that soft, creamy focus in the background of photographs that really help create emphasis on your focal point or whatever object you have in the foreground, which in this case is my dog. Okay, so this is our Photoshop workspace. We have here in the middle the canvas, which is your printable area. So that is what would print if I chose to. Off here to the side, we have our toolbar. So we have a variety of different tools that you have access to in order to alter different things about your photographs. So Photoshop has pretty much become so well known as a program in the industry that it's become the industry standard, and to Photoshop something is now a verb in the English language. So while you have access to this program this semester, I would encourage you using it. If you do not have Photoshop on your computer yet, for whatever reason, you can use photopea.com, Photopea, like the vegetable, and there's several other free options as well. Just know that they're not necessarily as robust as Photoshop. There's a reason this is really the industry standard. So we're going to look at several of these tools today. Up here on the top is the options bar. This changes depending on which tool you select. You'll notice that there's different options for each tool, and we'll be kind of getting more and more familiar with those over the course of the semester. Up at the top we have the menu bar. I don't know if that displays on your screen or not, but it says Photoshop on the left, and then you have like the file menu, the image menu, the view, the window. And then over here off to the right, we have our different panels. So the panels are things like, adjusting color and changing the minor adjustments on a picture. And really your layers panel is the main panel you want to make sure you always have open, because that's just a great way to stay organized in your workspace, with a multi-layered document. So you can I always start by making a copy of the back layer by dragging it down to this little plus sign down here, which means to make a copy. And there's usually 2 or 3 ways to do anything in this program. So you can also click up here on the menu. Each of these different panels have menus. So you can click up here and then go to duplicate layer if you would like. But I always like to start that way just so that I have a copy of my layer in case I do something weird, because it's really easy to mess up your photograph. So for example, if I just click on this background copy and use one of my selection tools, I make a rectangular selection here, and then say I move this with the move tool. Notice it eats the pixels, so there's nothing below it. So now if I were to deselect that, that's now a permanent part of this layer. So just be aware of that. It's important to have, and then you can go ahead and step backward. Command D. Command D for deselect, or you can go up to the select menu and choose deselect. Photoshop makes it kind of hard to deselect on purpose because you might spend a lot of time making a selection. You don't want to accidentally click off and mess it up. So that's why I like having this background copy here just as a backup in case I mess something up on this copy. I can always delete it and then make another copy of that background. And usually I'll turn off the eyeball. This toggles between visible and invisible with that eyeball indicator. It can help you see what's on each layer. Okay, off to the left. Again, these are your tools, so they can do minor things such as under this tool here, this is the dodge and burn, so you can make my dog here lighter. You You can kind of see how that's working. So if you want to brighten your highlights or something, kind of have some light coming in, we can brighten him there. If you click and hold down, these little white carrots next to each tool indicates that there's a hidden tool there, so you can like use the burn tool. I'm using the right bracket key to make it bigger. You can also adjust it with the brush preset picker up here at the top with the size. So maybe I want to darken the water or something, and you can lower the exposure if that's a little bit too intense in order to kind of use this as like with a brush. Okay, so that's the dodge and burn tools. Really in this tutorial, I kind of wanted to go over the selection tools and then how to blur the background. Real fast before I do that, usually 9 times out of 10, what a photographer needs to do to a photograph, you need to do like globally to the whole photo. So most of the time you may not even need to make selections and have multiple layers, maybe just on your basic document. You want to add some what are called adjustment layers. So these will adjust basics from brightness and contrast to the hue saturation, black and white, adding a photo filter. There's lots of different things to explore, so you may just want to try a couple of these on your whichever picture you're using for this tutorial. So you click brightness and contrast, and you'll notice that it appears in the layers panel separate from the background copy layer. And I can rename these layers. I'll just call this background 2, because it's my copy, just to kind of stay organized. So on this adjustment layer, you can make it brighter, you can make it darker. Notice how it's affecting the whole document. Increasing the contrast makes the darks darker and the lights lighter. This moves more closer to gray, so you may want more contrast. Maybe you want to adjust the hue saturation. This can do weird things to the colors. There's like a black and white option where you can adjust the individual color frequencies here. Make the greens brighter, kind of stand out. And then if you decide that you don't like any of these adjustment layers, you can just turn them off. So click on this little eyeball. They're still there, so you can turn them back on again pretty easily. But the eyeball can really help you see what layer you're on. 9 times out of 10, if something's not working, it's because you're on the wrong layer. So definitely before calling me over, check your layers panel, see which layer you're on, because most of the time, if it's not working, it's because you're on the wrong layer. That's usually a really quick, easy fix. Okay, so I've already added my adjustment layers. Maybe I like this brightness and contrast. I'm going to go back to my background layer, my background 2, and I need to select my dog. So there's several tools that Photoshop has to make selections pretty easy. We already saw the rectangular marquee tool. If you click and hold that down, you can also select in like a circle. Command D to deselect. I really like the lasso tool. These 3 categories here are all your categories of selection tools. So the lasso tool lets you make like a freeform selection if that's something that you want, kind of like drawing with the pencil tool. The magnetic lasso is a hidden tool underneath that, which allows you to click and drag along the outline. So it's kind of finding that edge of contrast. I'm going to go kind of fast, but if you go slow, it makes a better edge. Whoop, 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 all the way around. Obviously, this is not perfect. And then when you're done, hit enter. And now there's my selection, really sloppy. If you wanted to feather this edge, I usually like, instead of just having like a harsh edge from, one part of the document to another, I like to feather it slightly. So with any of these selection tools clicked, you can go up here to select and mask. And then this option, I like to view it on the red one. This option allows you to feather that edge. So watch what happens as I increase the feather value. See how it's a little bit of a softer transition between my selection and my background. So whenever you're finished with that, you can just click OK. Now obviously this is not the selection I like, so I'm going to deselect that and try one more tool. The magic wand tool selects based on color, so you can kind of see up here you can choose to, add to your selection, subtract from your selection. Usually it's on this where it makes a new selection each time, so it's only selecting the dark areas, the light areas. So this is selecting pixels that are all within a certain range of the one that you clicked on. I think the easiest tool to use would probably be the quick selection tool. So I'm going to deselect everything, and then I'm just going to paint my selection of my dog here, and I'm just clicking inside him. I'm not clicking the background. It did sort of blur that edge between his fur and the grass, so I may have to go back and fix that, but basically there's my selection, and then I can go select and mask again, maybe feather the edge a little bit. And this is just a preview. It just shows you what you would have selected if you copy and paste. Okay, that's pretty good. Click OK. If I wanted to, I can subtract this part from the selection, either going up here to subtract from selection or holding down the Option key and dragging. And notice how that's getting rid of that part now because I have too much selected. Something like that. Okay, he's not perfect, but for the sake of this, I'm just going to go ahead with it. Edit, copy, and that's Command C. Edit, paste, Command V. And now on layer 1, I see my dog. So I'm going to rename that so I know what's on that layer, and you can see if I hide my background, that's the only thing on that layer is Blitzen. Now I really want to make my photograph look like it has a shallow depth of field. Right now it's pretty great. You can see all the houses in the background and everything. So I'm going to try and blur the top half of my picture, but I want the bottom half to be in focus. So it's a two-step process. I'm going to go to this background, number 2, and I'm going to make it blurry. So under the filter menu at the very top of your screen, you have different blur options. I think the Gaussian blur and the lens blur work the best for this. So I'm just going to choose the Gaussian blur. This creates like a nice creamy blur. And you can see the preview here. If I increase the radius of those pixels, it'll get really blurry. That's almost hard to recognize what's in the background. Maybe that amount of blur is kind of good. And it's not like a perfect, like I said, it's not a perfect selection that I did here. I didn't spend much time on it. So that's okay. Just do your best. Okay, so the problem here is not only is the background blurry, but so is the foreground where Blitzen's sitting. So theoretically, if this was from the lens, blurring it from the aperture, we would need the grass up in the foreground to also be visible. So what we're going to do is we're going to hide the bottom of background layer 2 and reveal the layer beneath it. So this layer I'm going to turn on. You can kind of see this is background 2. It's turned off. It's turned on. Off, on. So you can see what's on each layer. Okay, I'm going to use a mask for this. So a mask in Photoshop is just like you would think, like a mask if you wear a mask. You have holes cut out for your eyes, but it covers part of your face. So down here at the bottom of the layers panel, we have adding a layer mask. So if you click to add a mask, it's the rectangle with the circle cut out of it. Right now I just added a white mask. So everywhere that it's white on the mask will be revealed. And anywhere that I put black, it will hide that part of the mask. So for example, don't do this, but if I were going to make like a selection here, and then I were to go edit, fill, and fill this with the foreground color, which is black, it's going to hide that part of my mask. Kind of like a little window. See? A little window where we can see the background through that window. Okay, I'm going to undo that. Edit, undo, edit, undo. You have to go back in time. Command D. Okay, so what I want is it fading from in focus at the bottom to blurred at the top. And you may have to watch this video several times to get the hang of this because it does have several steps. So the first thing I needed to do, let me delete that again so you can see, is I need to add just a blank mask to that layer. Think, just like that. Now on this mask, I'm going to add a gradient. So you come over here to the gradient tool, and then I have black as my foreground color, white as my background, so it's going to fade from black to white. So when I click and drag, notice what it just did. On my mask, it added black at the bottom, and then it fades with that gradient, fades smoothly to white. So it's going from hidden, so the blurred layer is hidden, all the way up to revealed. So background 2, I'm just going to call this blur, so I know that this is the layer with blur on it. And that looks pretty convincing. So you could be done at this point. You can also play around, like I said, with other tools or with other adjustment layers. Maybe adding like a photo filter can make it look like a sepia toned, like an old-fashioned, old-timey photo. I noticed little things on here. So again, this is the move tool. You can move things separate. Maybe you don't want to do that. So if I wanted to move my dog around, that's what the move tool does. But I may want to fix some of these things here. So I have this selection on my dog layer that I don't want. So I could take my little eraser tool, maybe just erase along there so that it's less noticeable. Okay, so that is creating the effect or the illusion of the bokeh blur in the background of your photographs for your Toy Story project, and adding basic adjustment layers like brightness and contrast and hue saturation, color balance, black and white, that kind of thing, to your layers overall, and making selections in order to isolate certain parts of the photograph from others.